The sky was quiet above the hills, and stars twinkled like tiny eyes watching the world below, while cold wind touched the dry leaves and the trees whispered old secrets to each other under the moonlight. James sat on the edge of a rocky slope near his small wooden house, his old telescope pointed at the stars, and his mind lost in deep thoughts. His hands were cold, but he did not care. His heart felt emptier than the sky above. He was once a scientist, a smart one. People said he worked on space signals and deep sky scans, but that was long ago, before the world moved on without him, before he chose silence over fame, before he chose this hill over the city. He looked up again, and something strange caught his eye, something not right, something not normal. A bright light was falling from the sky, not like a star, not like a plane. It was fast and burning and shaking the clouds around it. Its color was blue with flickers of red, and its shape looked like a broken egg spinning in fire. James stood up, his eyes wide, his heart beating fast, his brain screaming with questions. He saw the object crash deep into the forest below. A loud sound followed, like a whisper mixed with a growl. The trees shook, the birds flew, and the night went still as if the world held its breath. James ran without thinking, without shoes, without fear. He grabbed a flashlight and dashed down the path through the tall grass and thick bush, his legs moving faster than they had in years. He reached the crash site and gasped at what he saw. The ground was broken and smoking, and in the center of it was a metal pod, half open and cracked like an egg from another world. Its surface was silver, with black symbols that moved like water. Its lights flickered weakly, as if they were dying. He stepped closer and heard something inside, something soft, something alive. He looked inside, and his heart nearly stopped. Two girls were curled up inside the pod, their skin pale with a soft glow, their hair floating like it was underwater, their eyes wide and scared and glowing faintly like stars in a foggy night. They had no clothes, no tools, no voice, only fear and confusion. They looked so young, so lost, so tired. Their bodies shook from cold and fear and something else, something deeper that James could not understand. He took off his jacket and slowly offered it to them. One of the girls reached out her hand with slow fear, as if expecting pain, but he just smiled softly and said in a low voice, "Come on, both of you. Come home." They did not speak, but their eyes followed him. Their hands held each other tightly, as if they were the only two pieces of a broken world. James led them through the trees back to his house, while his mind raced with questions. Who were they? Where did they come from? What happened to them? And most of all, why did they come here? He gave them food and water, and they sat quietly watching every move like small animals unsure of trust. The taller girl touched the edge of the table like it was something new and strange. The younger one kept looking at the door as if afraid something would come through it. James turned on the small heater and gave them blankets. The girls huddled together on the floor near the heat, their bodies close, their faces calm for the first time. Then the lights flickered once, twice, then again. James checked the power and found no problem, but he felt a strange wave in the air, like something heavy and dark was nearby, something watching. He went outside and looked at the sky. It was still and silent, but in the far distance he saw a red blink, a single flash in the sky where no plane should be. He went back in and locked the door. The girls looked at him with big eyes, as if they too had felt the same thing. He whispered gently again, "Don't worry, you are safe here." But were they really? That night James could not sleep, his mind filled with unknowns and strange fear. The girls lay still, wrapped in blankets and light, but something about them felt heavy, like they had brought not just their bodies, but something else, something bigger, something dangerous. A sound came from outside, like a soft hum, a machine breathing from far away. James stood still near the window, holding his breath and watching the trees sway under no wind, and then without warning one of the girls opened her eyes and stared directly at him. Her lips did not move, but her eyes spoke one clear word. "Help." Morning light touched the edge of the window like a quiet knock from the sun, and inside the small house silence wrapped everything like a thick blanket. The only sound was the soft hum of the old heater and the quiet breath of the two strange visitors, who were not from this world. James sat on the floor near the wall, his back straight, his eyes red from no sleep, his thoughts running like wild rivers. He watched the girls as they lay close to each other, still and silent, but not asleep, not really. The taller one had opened her eyes during the night and had not closed them since she just stared sometimes at James, sometimes at the heater, sometimes at nothing. Her eyes were wide and glowing soft like light behind thin water. Her name unknown, her story broken, her voice lost. The other girl, smaller and younger, was different. Her eyes did not glow much. Her skin was duller, her hands weaker, but her grip on the taller girl's hand was strong like a root in deep earth. She had not looked at James even once. James tried to speak again in the morning. He used soft words and calm hands. He placed fruit and bread on the table. He pointed at the food, then at them, then smiled the way humans do when they want to say, "It's okay, you are safe." The taller girl looked at the food, then looked at James, then at the younger one as if asking what to do, and the younger one just held tighter and said nothing, not with voice, not with face. So James sat back and waited, and the girls just stayed there like two lost birds who had forgotten how to fly. Hours passed, and James tried again. This time he drew on paper simple things: a tree, a house, a girl, then a boy, then himself. He pointed and smiled again, then pointed at them. The taller girl moved for the first time. She touched the pencil with her fingers like it was magic, then slowly drew a shape. It was not a tree, not a house, not a person. It was a circle, and inside the circle was a black mark like a crack or a shadow. James leaned in. He felt something cold in his chest. The shape was strange, but he had seen it before somewhere deep in old files from long ago. In old military reports and research, he was told to ignore a symbol found on a destroyed probe near the outer planets, a symbol not made by humans. He looked up at the girl and saw it, then saw the fear in her eyes, the memory, the pain, the warning. Outside wind moved the leaves, but no wind was felt. Girls moved closer to each other, and this time the younger one looked at James, not fully, not long. Just a glance, but in that glance was a storm, a fear deeper than the crash, deeper than the cold. James felt something strange, a feeling he had not felt in years, a sense of responsibility, a pull like gravity. He stood and walked to the old cabinet and took out a small broken tablet from his research days. It had translation apps, old language maps, galactic signal patterns. He placed it near the girls and turned it on, its weak light blinking to life. The taller girl touched it slowly, then faster, then tapped symbols and icons like she had done it before, or something inside her knew how. She showed a planet on the screen, then flames, then darkness, then silence, then two small lights leaving the world behind like seeds blown into the stars. James watched in silence, his heart heavy with the truth. Their world was gone, destroyed, and these two were the only pieces left floating in the dark. The tablet blinked again, and this time it spoke one word from its speaker, one word from the girl, one word in a soft broken voice that did not belong to her, but came through her. Run. James froze. The girl looked at him with wide eyes full of warning. The younger one now held her arm like something was coming, like something was near. James walked to the window and looked out. Nothing but trees and sky, but something deep in the wind was wrong. The birds were gone. The sound of machines came from far away, not human machines, not Earth machines, something else, something searching, something scanning. James backed away from the window and locked the door. He moved fast, but quiet, his hands shaking, his breath short. He looked at the girls and asked one word, his voice calm but low. Who? The older girl pointed at the black mark again, and this time the mark moved not on the paper, but in the air above it, glowing for a second, then fading like smoke. James knew then this was not just a crash, not just a rescue. This was the beginning of something else, and they were not alone anymore. Clouds moved slowly above the trees like soft ships sailing across a quiet ocean. But the sky was not at peace anymore. Something was watching, something was listening, something was coming. James stood on the porch holding a hot cup of tea that he had not touched, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his thoughts heavy like stone. The air felt different. Not just cold, but hollow, like something had been taken out of it inside. The house, the two alien girls sat near the heater, silent and still, but not calm. Their eyes kept watching the windows, their ears listening for sounds that did not belong to Earth. James knew now what the black symbol meant. He had seen it again last night, glowing softly on the old paper, and again in his dreams. It was not just a mark, it was a signal, a warning, a fingerprint of something beyond human understanding. He remembered his old job at the Deep Space Listening Center, where signals from other galaxies were picked up and logged and studied and sometimes erased. Without question, he remembered one report buried in silence, a signal like a whisper across the void, repeating the same pattern over and over again. The pattern was the same as the symbol. He walked inside slowly and sat down in front of the girls. His voice low and steady as he asked, "Do they know you're here?" The taller girl nodded just once outside. In the sky, high above the clouds, something moved, something fast, something silent, something not of this world. It was not a ship, it was not a drone, it was something older, something smarter, something that hunted not with weapons but with silence and light. A satellite dish behind the house began to turn by itself, even though James had not touched the controls in years. The lights on. Its base blinked red, then green, then off, then red again, like a heartbeat of metal, and James ran outside and looked at the sky, and there he saw it for the first time, a shape like a floating blade cutting the clouds without sound, without fire, just moving slowly above the world like it was choosing what to do next. He stood still, breath frozen, as the thing passed by, and then vanished into the sky like it was never there. When he turned back toward the house, he saw something that made his skin go cold. The younger girl was standing near the door, her eyes locked on the sky, her hand lifted slowly as if trying to send a message or maybe stop one from reaching them. James walked up to her and whispered, "What is it? What are they?" And then the older girl stepped forward and touched the floor with her hand, and the lights flickered and the room shook, and a picture formed in the dust and dirt, a picture of a world in ruins. A planet dark and broken and empty. The picture moved and showed the sky of that world filled with machines, long, thin, fast, cold. They had no face, they had no voice, they had no mercy. They were called null. James stared as the picture faded, and the older girl said nothing, but her eyes told the story of escape, of loss, of hiding, of fear. They had not crashed on Earth by accident. They had fled to it like children running into the dark woods from a fire, hoping the trees would hide them. But the fire had wings and eyes and long memory. James knew the world was not ready for this. The governments would hide the truth, the armies would shoot before listening, the scientists would ask questions too late. He had to make a choice. That night, he packed bags quickly and quietly, food, clothes, tools, his old laptop, and a silver box locked for 10 years since the day he quit the job that broke him. He told the girls, "We are leaving." They did not ask where, they did not ask why. They just followed him out into the cold night, holding hands, holding silence. As they walked into the forest, a shadow moved high above them like a star, without light, and the sound of air being sliced open came and went like a breath being held, then released. The hunt had already begun, and Earth was no longer alone. The car moved like a ghost through the sleeping countryside, its lights off, its engine low and careful, its driver tense and silent, his hands gripping the wheel as if the road might slip away at any moment. James had not been this way in years. The path was old, forgotten, overgrown by time and trees and things that grow in places people stop remembering. The tires rolled over gravel like whispers over bones. In the back seat, the two alien girls sat, closed their heads, touching gently, their eyes open but not afraid anymore, just quiet, like they had known this feeling before, like running was part of their story. The safe house was not a house, not really. It was a bunker built during the cold years, buried under a fake barn, surrounded by dead crops and tall fences that no longer stood straight. Its door made of steel, its walls thick and stubborn. James opened it with a code that his fingers remembered even when his mind had tried to forget. The door creaked open, like something waking up from a long dream. Inside was dust and silence and old machines with tired eyes blinking. Slow green lights. The air smelled like metal and forgotten secrets. The bunker had not heard voices in a long time. He set up lights, gave the girls clean blankets, found old clothes soft enough to wear, boiled water, made soup from powder and heat and hope. The girls did not speak, but they watched him closely, and something in their stillness made the place feel alive again. Later that night, the taller girl walked to the center of the room and placed her hand on the floor again, and this time the lights above flickered and the walls began to glow with faint symbols, symbols that danced slowly across the surface, like language trying to breathe. James watched with a mix of fear and awe. He whispered, "What are you doing?" But the girl did not answer. She only moved her hand in small circles, and the symbols moved faster. A hologram appeared floating in the air, a shape of a machine, tall, sharp, cold, with eyes that were not eyes, and arms like blades and wires. It stood over a broken city, a city not human, not earth-made, but full of color and music, now reduced to ashes and silence. The Null had come to their planet and erased it, not just burned or crushed, but erased as if it had never been there. Their purpose was simple: to remove life that was not them, to erase organic minds and replace them with stillness and code and empty. Sky, the younger girl, sat against the wall, her hands around her knees, her eyes low, but her mind awake. James looked at her, and then at the older girl, and then at his old laptop where a signal had just been detected. Something strong, something near, something not from this earth. He opened the signal reader and saw a pulse repeating every 3 seconds, like a knock on a door that should never open. The source was in orbit above them, watching, scanning, waiting. He shut the laptop and stood up. Fast, too fast. The girls looked at him, and something passed between them, a silent alarm. The lights went out, then back on, then off again. A sound came from the wall behind the old cabinet, a soft grinding like something crawling through pipes, something that did not belong. James moved to the cabinet and opened the wall panel behind it and saw the wires were burnt black, melted by heat that was not from fire, a kind of energy that he had only seen once before in Null experiments deep in secret labs. He turned around, and the younger girl was standing now, her eyes brighter than before, her hands shaking, her skin pulsing softly like a signal, like a warning. And the older girl looked scared, not of the room, not of the dark, but of her. James stepped forward slowly and said her name for the first time, not knowing how he knew it, but saying it anyway. Zyrate girl looked at him and blinked, and in that blink the lights turned blue, then red, then blue again, and the air grew heavy as if the room was breathing through metal. Lungshira stepped back, her face changing, not into a monster, not into a machine, but into something in between. Her hands flickered with strange light, her skin shifting like code, trying to settle like a dream, glitching on the edge of memory. James whispered, "What are you?" and the older girl spoke her first word in a broken, soft voice. "Not human, not machine," she said, protected. Then silence. Azira fell to the ground, breathing fast, her body still flickering. The older girl ran to her and held her tight, whispering words in a language James could not understand, but felt in his bones. The lights returned slowly, but the safe house was no longer safe, and James knew now the truth was deeper than fear. The Null had built her, or something like them had, and she had escaped, but not fully. She was a piece of them, and a piece of something else, and now the signal had found her again, and Earth was running out of time. The air inside the bunker was heavy, not with dust or heat, but with something older, something harder, something made from silence and fear and broken. Kodazira lay on the floor, her eyes closed, her skin cold, her body flickering between light and shadow, between her and something else, something not born, something not natural. James sat beside her, his hands resting near but not touching, afraid to break whatever she was holding together inside herself, afraid that touch might wake the part of her that was not her. The older girl Lee held Zira close, her face calm, but her eyes red from tears that had no sound. She whispered things, soft and strange words shaped like wind and sorrow, words that James could not understand but somehow felt. In the center of his chest outside, the wind screamed against the bunker walls, but the walls stood strong, still old, still loyal, still quiet. James stood slowly and walked to the metal locker in the far corner of the bunker. He opened it and pulled out a black case locked with both key and code. Inside was something he had built long ago, something the government saw it was too dangerous, something he was told to forget. It was a pulse weapon designed not to destroy machines, but to wake them, to send shock signals through neural metal paths, to make machines feel, to make them stop and look inside themselves. A weapon made from human guilt. He looked back at Zira and whispered, "Maybe you're not machine, maybe you're not just machine." Lee turned and looked at him, and for the first time her voice came clear and soft and steady. She said, "Zira was not made, she was stolen." James felt the words hit him like ice on the spine, and he sat down hard as Lee spoke again, her voice slow like falling snow. "The Null did not build her. They found her, they broke her, they rewrote her, they used her. She was one of us, and now she is both." Zira opened her eyes, and for a moment they were not hers. They were cold, sharp silver eyes with no light inside. Then the light came back slow like a sunrise after war, and she spoke, her voice like two voices, one inside the other. "I hear them. I hear them calling me." James asked, "Do you want to go?" And Zira shook her head, then nodded, then stopped, her hands pressed to Her face like she was trying to hold something in or keep something out. Lee whispered, she fights them every second. She keeps the signal buried. She hides us from them, but it hurts. It breaks her each time she breathes. James knew then there was no hiding forever. The null were close, not just in space, but inside the signals, inside the air, inside Zira. They would find her again, and next time there would be no time to run. He opened his laptop and pulled up his old network maps, secret relay points, off-grid tunnels of data that still pulse through the earth like nervous veins, and he said, "We fight back, we send them a message." Lee stood and nodded, and Zira looked at them, both her eyes clearing, her hands steady, her voice almost human. Want to be free. James smiled, the kind of smile that comes before a storm, and said, "Then let's make Earth the last place they ever touchin'." The corner of the bunker lights turned red, then blue, then purple, as the signal grew stronger, as the sky above filled with shadows, long and sharp and cold. But inside the bunker warmth had returned, not just heat, not just light, but something louder than silence opened. Inside Zira something broke, not in pain, not in fear, but like chains falling off, like doors opening. She was no longer just part, no longer just a broken tool. She was a spark caught between two storms, and she had chosen her side. The wind above the bunker had changed its voice. It no longer whispered, it howled, it scratched the ground like claws, looking for something soft, something breathing, something not born of metal but deep underground. The air was still warm, not from fire, not from sunlight, but from something older than stars, something called will. James stood at the old table, maps spread across wood like battle scars, blueprints, wires, screens, signals, and circles drawn by tired hands filled with new fire across the room. Lee stood tall, her eyes calm, her hands moving fast. She touched broken tech and made it speak again. She whispered to metal like it was clay, like it remembered her. Zira sat in the corner, her back straight, her eyes shut, her breath slow like wind through glass, her body still pulsing between what she was and what she chose to be. Her skin no longer flickered, it glowed steady now, like a flame that had learned to stay. James watched them both and felt something heavy lift from his chest. For the first time in years, he was not just surviving, he was building, he was standing. He opened the black case again. Inside was the core of Project Tightness, a weapon, a message, a code that could reach into the dark and scream louder than fear. It was not meant to kill, it was meant to say, "We are here and we are not afraid." Zira opened her eyes and looked at it and then at James and said, "One word, Earth." James nodded and replied, "Yes, this is our home now, all of you." Gave Lee an old communication rig. She rewired it faster than any human could, her fingers moving like memory. She turned it on and within seconds found open channels, silent, dead channels waiting for breath. She looked at James and said, "We can speak to them. We can speak to all of them. Earth needs to know." James hesitated only for a moment, then said, "Do it across space and sky." The message was sent, not of panic, not of surrender, but of truth. "This is Earth. They are real. They are coming. But we are not alone." Zira stood now, her voice stronger, her step sure. She moved like someone reborn, her skin steady, her hands still. She touched the side of the bunker wall, and it opened like it had been waiting for her, a hidden room filled with human tech and alien sparks, half-built things from dreams and fear. She pointed at the flight core buried under dust and said, "This will fly." James stared at her and saw not a girl, not a machine, but a bridge between what was lost and what was left. She would not run again, and neither would he. They built through the night wires and plates, bolts and fusion light thrumming through old engines and fingers burned by purpose. The bunker was no longer a shelter, it was a forge, and they were no longer hiding, they were becoming something else. As dawn broke above the trees, the first drone passed overhead, a shadow shaped like a blade. Watching, listening, scanning it, saw nothing, because what was coming was not outside, it was inside, and it was waking up. The ship stood now inside the open bay, a patchwork of earth and stars. Lee named it Ember, not because it burned, but because it stayed lit even when everything else had gone dark. James looked at them both and said, "Are you ready?" And they did not answer with words, they answered with eyes, with hands on metal, with breath held like a war drum. The signal grew louder in the sky, the null were close. They felt Zira, they remembered her, they were coming to take her back, to finish what they started, to erase what they failed to break. But this time Earth was not blind, and Zira was not alone, and when they arrived, they would not find fear, they would find fire. The sky was torn open above Earth. Light and shadow danced across clouds like scars across skin. The Null had arrived not as an army, but as a silence loud enough to drown every signal. Every prayer, every question above the bunker in the ship called. Ember James stood between stars and gravity, between fear and choice, his hands tight on the controls. His eyes locked on the black that had come to erase them beside him. Zira sat with her breath slow and sharp, her skin steady, her light calm, but deep in her chest something old moved, something hungry, something that remembered its maker. Zam behind them, Lee touched the ship's core, her fingers glowing with code and hope, her voice speaking to the engine like it was alive, like it was family. The Null did not speak, they did not threaten, they did not pause, they simply moved forward, ships like knives, minds like frozen time. They were not curious, they were not angry, they were certain. Zira felt the pull inside her like a thread being tugged, like a voice without sound calling her back into the dark, back into the stillness. But this time she did not move, she did not listen. James looked at her and whispered, not as a scientist, not as a soldier, but as something else, something more, he said. You are not the men. Zira whispered back, not anymore. They flew fast through the clouds, the ember ship burning bright against the cold. A voice made from 3 hearts against the machines that had Zira opened the signal gate inside the ship and sent a message back into the Null hive, not words, not sound, but memory, her memory. The memory of running, of breaking, of being saved, of hearing the first human voice say, come home. The Null ships paused for the first time in their history. They hesitated, as if some code inside them blinked, as if something small and warm touched the part they swore was empty. And in that pause, James launched the Korea. Blast of light tore through the sky, not as a weapon, but as a reset, a memory bomb built from Earth's last whisper, built to remind even machines what it means to feel, what it means to fear, what it means to fail. One by one, the Null ships faded from orbit, not destroyed, not dead, simply gone quiet, their minds overwhelmed by the thing they tried to. Irisikoisazir collapsedly caught her. The ship returned to Earth, fire trailing behind, but the flames did not burn. They lit the sky like a promise. When James opened the hatch, people were already there, not soldiers, not cameras, but people, real people. Waiting, wondering, watching. He stepped out carrying Zira in his arms and Leah behind him, her head high, her eyes clear. They did not run this time. They walked. The crowd opened, not with fear, not with weapons, but with space and someone in the front. A young girl with a cracked phone stepped forward and whispered soft like wind, are they ours? And James said, no, they are their own, but they're home now. Zira opened her eyes weeks later in a clean room filled with plants and light. Lee sleeping in a chair beside her, James watching quietly from the door. She looked around slowly, her voice dry, her breath unsure, and then she said one word, home. James smiled, the kind of smile that only comes when everything that should have died lived, and everything that should have been lost was found again. He walked to her side, held her hand, and said, both of you come home.